in the world of glass blowing, one of the things that happens is that when the glass is hot, it's very malleable. Once it's red hot, you can shape it and you can color it and you can turn it around and things like that. So one thing I'd like to say is that we are kind of like the opposite in some respects. What I mean by that is when there's peace and things are cool and things are good, then people tend to be very malleable. When everything's good, so you know what, honey, there's something I'd really like to speak to you about. Oh, what is it, honey? You know, what is it, honey? You know, people are very relaxed and they're good. When you're in the middle of a war, you tend to be a lot less like molten glass and a lot more like armored up. And so when we're in the middle of a conflict, when we're fighting, that is not the time to deal with, well, you need to, you know, I've got very strong boundaries and you have to conform to the way you're shouting at me. How could you call me like that?
That's not going to make the person stop shouting.
It's not going to shouting at the person not going to help the person not shout at you. As we've learned, right? We learned this one, right? And that's why when we're not at war, that's why building healthy marriages, I mean, when we're not fighting, that's a time, that's when we repair the castle. And that's why it's the perfect time to say, you know what? I don't want to bring up what happened last week, you know, but when we were arguing last week, I really felt like I didn't speak to you correctly and you didn't speak to me correctly. We've got to avoid situations like that because I love you so much. I care about you so much that when we end up in an argument like we're in last week and you raised your voice at me for the 50th time. I mean, I would never do that to you, but for you, like, just joking. But if we take that approach of when things are better, we put the energy in, we can start to rebuild the castle. Whereas if I start in the moment, in the heat of the moment, to start to put my requirements on it, very often that won't help. That being said, there are some ground rules in marriage that we know is the more. There's a beautiful mashal about this. They say that when lovers are close, they whisper to each other. I don't know if anyway. I'm sure everybody who's listening they understand this that lovers whisper to each other. And when you're angry, what happens is all of a sudden you're in the same room, but you're like talking down like an Indian telephone to each other. You're screaming at each other. Why? What happened? Is because when the hearts are close, you don't need so much volume to be heard. And as the hearts get farther away, the voice tries to do the job of making the distance, right? So because I feel my heart's very far from you, now I have to raise my voice because you don't hear me. You're not hearing me, right? But before, when our hearts are close, and all of a sudden, the smallest whisper, the smallest gesture, smallest shape of the eyes and the smile can mean everything. And so part of it is to take control of that and understand that even when we feel that our hearts are very far away because the person we love is disagreeing with us, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person is far away. And having that consciousness, having that understanding, and when things are right, building strategies that help the marriage, and when things are wrong, trying to take control that we don't make things worse. And I guess the question is, what turns an argument into a fight? That is the real question.
One style or kind of argument happens over silly things, right? Something really stupid, and both of you are like, oh my gosh, we argued about the stupidest thing, and you can move on, and it didn't really cause damage. But it didn't really. You had a stupid argument about something stupid, and a day or two later, we can both agree that whatever that was a pretty stupid thing. You were tired, I was cranky. It's not such a stupid thing to say, because when people's basic needs are met, they are less likely to become angry, right? Like when people are fed and they're warm and they're taken care of, they don't take. But anyway, so there's those kinds of arguments, and then there are those that you mentioned that come up over and over again, and those are the arguments that lead into a fight. You are very unlikely to go into a full-blown war with your partner about something stupid. Usually those are maybe just a heated argument, but you're not going to go into those very familiar war zones over a new argument. Usually those are the ones that we've done so many times, over and over again. But the sad truth is that unless we handle them and unless we can resolve them in a safe and controlled way, even if it might take some time, these are the ones that cause separations and that cause people to drift apart even when they're still together. So here is a good example of a topic that might lead to a fight, right? Is, can my partner come to me with an issue? Can my partner come to me with something that bothers them? Can they bring up a concern or a hurt or a desire and feel heard and understood? And do you truly care about their feelings? And if the answer is yes, then you're on dangerous ground, because now that's going to take something from you. It means that you are not allowed to punish them for coming to you with a concern. You are not going to like it when they come to you with a negative emotion. You're not going to like it when they come to you with hurt that you might have unintentionally caused, right? But if you just answered, yes, I do care enough about their feelings, it means that you're not allowed to start attacking them when they come to you with a concern that might have hurt them, or something that they're uncomfortable about, or something that hurts them, or something that bothers them. You are not allowed to punish them for that. If your answer is yes, I do care about them. So you have to think, what are you going to do in that moment? Because it's in these moments that we have the opportunity to really grow. Those are the moments that we really have the opportunity to repair disconnect, right? When your partner comes and says, look, what you've done has really hurt me, and I know you didn't necessarily mean to, but I'm really hurt about it. One of two things can happen. You can either go into full-on defense mode, which is what usually happens, and then you start shouting and screaming and we're back to square one. But what you are teaching your partner when you do that is you're showing them that I'm not a safe place for you to come when you're hurt. I am not a safe place for you to come when you are hurt, or when you are angry, or when you are scared, or just vulnerable, right? Because underneath the majority of conflicts, there's a person that asks, do you care enough about me to take my feelings into consideration? Do you care enough? That's what's under it. Under all that screaming and shouting and yelling and name calling is someone saying, I'm hurt. And do you care enough to help me with that hurt? Can I trust you? And it is your job to bring that, because if you are able to bring that reassurance in that moment, then it's not going to turn into a fight. Because now the person that came to you with the hurt feels safe. You can rely on me. I am a safe place for you. I'm not going to punish you for being vulnerable with me. You are more important to me. Your feelings are more important to me than this argument.
Very beautiful. And I think that the more that one can develop that, you can begin to journey into real vulnerabilities and real fears and real desires, not just in a safe way, but in a way that's very beautiful and very conducive. One thing we have to be very cautious about is that we don't end up fighting about the argument rather than the subject of the argument. What do I mean by this? It's a very simple thing, right? How could you speak to me like that? Me? I never do that. Me? I would never say that. I never do that. So what ends up happening is that basically this is a defense mechanism. So we end up saying, well, how could you be so rude? So rather than talking about the topic, we shift it to how the person is relaying the topic to us. Because that's very often it's something we don't want to deal with, we don't want to discuss it. So the fact that you brought it up, and in our generation, I'm offended. You've offended me.
Well, you already had the argument.
Right.
You've defended it so much in your head already that by the time the person comes to talk to you, you are so ready to tackle that. Like you've been building up armor in here for a while now.
Some of the things I've been practicing for decades, you've got no chance. You've got no chance, right? So the very fact that you would bring this up tells me you don't love me. The fact that you would mention this to me only shows you have no idea who I am. And all these kinds of things. So the people do, I do, and I'm sure you do as well. There are some areas that are so sensitive we're very scared and we're very nervous of them. And one thing I can tell you is that first of all, we sit across the table from many different kinds of couples. I'm sure you know, but Jewish, non-Jewish, mixed, different religious levels. And every couple has their own emotional, intellectual, physical, and spiritual reality going on. And very often we don't know what happens behind closed doors of a couple. We have an idea of what it might look like by getting to know people, but couples do not act the same way that they do in public as they do in private, right? Baruch Hashem, I would say. With a big Baruch Hashem there, it's very nice. But what that means for the therapist or rabbi or rabbanit or as us as counselors is that no matter what kind of advice we give people in terms of building their marriage, it's always up to the couple. It's a bit like this. Imagine, if someone gives you a treasure map, you still have to go and buy the shovel. You still have to go on the journey to go get the treasure. So no matter how accurate the treasure map, it's up to you ultimately to go on the journey. Now, one of the secrets that we've seen is that a couple at some point becomes conscious to different degrees that they have to work on their marriage. And this takes me really into the core of something that we touched on last time, but I think it's very important, which is that if you imagine, like, you've got a business, you start a business, right? So you take your coin and you go to the back garden and you dig a hole and you drop the coin in the ground and you're waiting for the money tree to happen, right? Anyone ever done that? No, right? There's nobody who takes a coin, they take $100, they bury it, and they just wait for the money tree to come up, right? Doesn't happen. Or there's a guy who goes to the gym and he stands against the back wall and he's watching everybody else on the machines and he's waiting to get healthier. Right? Doesn't make any sense. There's a musician, they decide that they want to be a great musician, so they keep the instrument in the box and they stare at the box for a few hours a day like this. There's a guy, he wants to become a great chef. He takes all his knives and all his special tools, he puts them in a drawer, he locks it. Stands like this. He's got the recipe books, he doesn't open it. What do we say about those people, right? We say that's a shame, right? They didn't understand the basics. And so a bit like that is to understand the key critical thing is that a marriage is not going to work just by itself. It doesn't do that. Nothing happens by itself. When we have children, is when we see children really want something. So we have to impart to them there's a certain amount of effort that's required to attain it. There's that magical moment, I'm sure everyone has had it, when the child is learning to ride a bike and you let go of the bike and all the time they've spent falling off and crashing and plummeting down to the bottom of the grass, it pays off and there's a wobble and they go. Why? Because everything in life that's worth having takes a tremendous amount of effort. And one of the problems that can happen in marriage is we can start to expect that, well, like I expect them to do it, it's going to be okay. Tov mod. Imagine if you ran a business right now and instead of instructing your team what to do, I'm just going to go hang out. I'm going to lock myself in the cupboard, right? I leave a cupboard on it, right? And the business will run itself, right? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The top CEOs, even the people who delegate, they're on top of everything. And that's why we have to understand that it's a magical formula. Effort equals success. It's not an absolute guarantee. Sometimes things are beyond our control. We like to say as Jews, effort plus Hashem equals success, right? It's not all down to us. There's a lot of prayer and a lot of avodat Hashem involved. But if your idea of marriage is that, well, I'd love my marriage to be a culinary delight, but I'm not going to research how the ingredients work together. I want my marriage to be a symphony, but I'm not interested in learning the scales. I want my marriage to be a success, but I'm not going to put at least as much effort as I'm putting into my business. It is basically guaranteed to fail. And if you think about anything in your life that you take seriously, anything that you're interested in or anything that's important to you, you know that you can't have it or be interested in it without a great deal of mental exertion, physical exertion, and interest in it. And what can happen in marriage is if we lose interest, we lose the ability to put energy into it. We're no longer putting effort into things. We should expect problems. And this is a general thing. This is a pattern that causes fight. You don't put any energy into this area of our marriage anymore. And whether that's a physical area or a spiritual area or an intellect, especially with women, an intellectual area. Used to be so interested in my day. Now, hey, Han, how was your day? Yeah, it was good. Oh, great. Okay. What's for dinner? As soon as people get to that place, they feel very undervalued and very unloved. At one point, it was fireworks. Now it's not fireworks. That hurts. At one point, it was roses. Now it's you're right, babe. You know, no one wants that. And one of the things about marriage is that we win each other's hearts by these expressions of how important we are to each other. And very often we lose that thread. We lose that thread. And the way to save a lot of marriages that we've seen in our own marriage, I would say, is that you wake up, you smell the coffee, and in the areas that you no longer make an effort, and you know what they are, normally you know what they are, you say, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore because this is a negative characteristic. Now, I know I'm lazy in this area. Or I could be more giving in this area. Or, you know, when was the last time I surprised my wife at work with some flowers or wrote her a love letter or did something like that? If you haven't done the thing that she loved and fell in love with you for, you better get with it and put the energy back in there.